Cardinal George, God rest his soul, once said while trying to contribute clarity to the sticky topic of faith and works, when doing evangelization, you don't lead with morality. But what he should have said was, most of the time you don't lead with morality. Most people have skeletons in their closet, so they will mostly respond with defensiveness or apathy. After all, a conversation about God, especially about a relationship with the God-man who died on the cross for something that had something to do with my sins, is much less threatening to a vast majority of people who are aware of their past sins. So I will quite agree that usually we don't lead with morality. However, St. James's warning can't be ignored. Two problems exist today which render Cardinal George and many others their admonition rather mute. First, there are people who honestly do not recognize sin as sin. Many of these people will quite honestly proclaim they do have a relationship with Jesus. And in such case, one can and should legitimately ignore the question about their relationship with Jesus. I can testify to dozens of people struggling with alcoholism or drug abuse, or a man and a woman completely convinced that his or her marriage to his or her same-sex partner is perfectly in harmony with the will of God. If you begin with a question about their relationship with Jesus, you find yourself getting nowhere, or else you find yourself, like many people today, coming to the conclusion that they must be right. How can they be wrong if they have a relationship with Jesus? Secondly, we in modern America live in a very pluralistic society. Therefore, we respect each individual's religious convictions or lack thereof. Since time immemorial, immorality has been known to destroy nations. In this context, there are many occasions when it is prudent to ignore the question about whether our neighbor has a relationship with Jesus or not. In such a case, it is better to lead with morals and pray a relationship with Jesus develops when they get a better sense of right and wrong. Sometimes a person needs to discover something in their lives, either X, Y, or Z, really is or was wrong. Then and only then will they desire for a relationship with God grow. It grows from a realization of one's need for forgiveness. We can say this with utmost confidence because God and goodness are interchangeable. All things that are in some way good are in some way part of God. All things that are bad push us away from God. A common example of what I'm talking about is the situation of praying at an abortion clinic, evangelizing people. A number of church people say people who pray outside an abortion clinic are the worst thing for evangelization. Nothing pushes people away from church as much as a person pointing their moral finger at a person going in or coming out of an abortion clinic. Well, I must declare, those who say things like that have never prayed outside an abortion clinic. Or if they have, they've never prayed with the kind of people I've prayed with at those places. If those church people who speak against such evangelical outreaches would ever talk to those people praying for those going in, they would soon realize that a good proportion of those praying folk are people who have been there themselves. The praying people who, yes, are leading with morality, are filled with compassion, understanding, and a desire to help as much as they can. It's a great example of the very acceptable position there, but for the grace of God go I. Oddly enough, those who insist the leading with morality is a bad way to evangelize are themselves guilty of moral righteousness. Let me be clear, I am not saying leading with morality is always the right way to evangelize, nor am I saying leading with the question about one's relationship with Jesus is always wrong. However, what is hurting the church today, I believe, is the insistence that leading with morality is always considered the wrong way to evangelize. This position is wrong on two counts. First, because some people will insist they already have a very fine relationship with Jesus, but need to grow in a better formation of their conscience. Secondly, it's wrong because it creates an environment where it is never the right time to discuss the moral issues. Our institutional programs have for years been practicing the art of delaying and waiting for the right moment to bring certain moral questions to the reality of faith life. But for years, the right time never arrives. This is dishonest because it reveals that the problem is not a problem of proper timing, but a problem of simple disagreement, or as we say in theological terms, dissent. So doesn't it seem to stand that saying you have a relationship with Jesus is almost saying nothing? After all, metaphysically speaking, or more simply, in the real world, doesn't everyone already have a relationship with Jesus? I mean, think about it. Everyone in the world really exists. God really exists. Ergo, everyone has a relationship with God. What we just need to develop is a good relationship with God. Think of it this way. Jesus, who is the face of God, doesn't appear or disappear depending on whether you or I acknowledge Jesus is there. He is always there, whether we talk to him or not, whether we obey him or not. Think of it this way. Those who don't acknowledge a personal relationship with Jesus have a relationship in the fashion of an estranged spouse. Many spouses have said, "You act as if I don't exist." Consider it. The way the spouse acts gives the illusion that the spouse doesn't exist. But of course the spouse exists. Those who comfort themselves with the conviction that I have a relationship with Jesus, but ignore his commands, are like this. It's Jesus who constantly is saying today, you act as if I don't exist. So you see, it's so important to keep together what God has joined. We can take that to mean husband and wife, of course, which is wonderful, but we should also take this to mean we must keep our pursuit of goodness wedded to our walk with the Lord. I'm Father Tom Koys. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Unlike Other Nations. God love you.